Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Only just like the sunrise. You know that we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Tonight, we're gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we're gonna light it up.
Oh, goodness. Sorry, Gary. No audio. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. Thank you, Gary. Can you guys hear me now? Yes, no, maybe so. Yeah. Well, let me start over. Hopefully you guys can hear me now. Let me know if you can't. I'm waiting. Test, test, test. Let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me now? Much better, Neil says. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Welcome to the HVAC Guide for Homeowners live show, where we talk about all things HVAC that no one else is talking about. Thank you for taking time out on your busy Tuesday evening, afternoon, night, whatever time it is where you are located, to hang out with us. I would just wanted to just say I've got a lot to cover tonight. I'm actually going through some things personally. So sorry if I'm not as enthusiastic as I maybe normally am, but instead of canceling the show, I said, I want to hang out with you guys. I want to go over some of the things we're going to go over tonight. And sometimes just the show will go on, and that's kind of where we're at. So if you do have any questions, hello to all you guys. I'm going to say hello to everyone in the chat in just a moment. But if you have any questions, concerns, I think you may have some concerns on some of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Feel free to drop those in the chat. And yeah, we'll keep this conversation going. So first of all, hello to Gary. Good to see you as always. Good to see Bob. Sometimes Bob catches our show, and I'll get his comments after the show if he wasn't here with us live. So Glad you're here, Bob, live. Insurance claims. Sorry to everybody when you couldn't hear me there. And moving on up to Clifton. Good to see you, pal. I was watching your show a couple times this week. If you didn't see the show that Clifton was our guest on a couple weeks ago, if you don't go watch any other show, go watch that one. Because that one was a barn burner. I was actually, if you're still here, Clifton, telling some guys today, I was teaching a class, some of the things we talked about on that show, and they were almost falling in the floor. I mean, I was like, I know. They were like, are you kidding me? I was like, I know. Isn't it crazy? So crazy, crazy time to be in our industry. Um, so thank you for that, Ryan. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit. I actually have an article we're going to cover in just a moment, but I don't think it's any secret, especially those of us that are in the HVAC industry. There is a lot of investment going on in our industry, and you might say, "Well, isn't that a good thing?" And maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not 100%. I'm not saying it's good or bad necessarily. I do have some concerns that we will cover in just a moment, but I'm also saying it's not all bad. You know, there are some concerns, but it's not all bad necessarily. But there are private equity firms that across our nation, they are um investing, and they are buying heating and air companies left and right. And just immediately hearing that, for me, raises a couple concerns. But you know, eh, just the makeup of our industry. If you were to go back when I got in this industry, in the town, city, if you want to say that, that I got started in, there were, I don't know, a dozen, 2 dozen, however many heating and air contractors in the area that strictly did residential, like I was, in. Some of those focus on new construction, some of them focused on service, but all in all, they all kind of they were all kind of mom and pop type businesses, even the big ones. You were in a lot of cases working directly for the owner of the company, you know. And I, in my new position, have been exposed to some of these companies that are now being invested in. And I actually maybe would go so far as to say that I'm seeing some good things on that side of it. I'm seeing some good things as far as infrastructure and the way things are done, right? Um, so I I I do have concerns on one front, but I also will say that I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing when someone has figured it out and they've got the system in place and they've got standards, right? That's something that maybe we could cover on that. They might say, "Hey, we've got some high standards here that you need to make sure you are uh doing a good job, and you are treating the customer in a certain manner, and having those standards," right? That's not necessarily a bad thing. But I will say, just immediately, I'll just say this: when a firm comes in and invests in a small mom and pop business, the question for me becomes why? Why are they doing that? And um, they I think the answer is pretty simple. They're doing that because they believe they're going to profit in some way. And so I think decisions might be made with that in mind, right? That could be a concern. That could be a concern for a homeowner, right? So, Brian, I'll get to your question in a second. But Brian says, "Did you sell to a private equity firm?" And I did not. I sold to another family-owned business. They're a much larger family-owned business than mine, but they are, I could pick up the phone and call the owner of that business, who, is the owner operators, the family themselves. And that was important to me, by the way. I wanted to sell to someone that would take care of our customers. And I'm not saying that a large private equity firm would have intentionally not taken care of our customers, but for me, it was an emotional decision. It wasn't just a business decision. It was an emotional decision. This was a business that I started from nothing. I literally bought a little utility trailer was my service vehicle for the longest time, for a very long time. That I literally sold things, like electronics and things like that, in my apartment in Richmond to buy my first little utility trailer and get started with the business. I remember not having enough money to wrap that trailer getting started. So I took yard signs and took the screws out of the side of the trailer and then put the screws through the sign to hold it on there. And that was my branding getting started. And so it was an emotional decision when I sold it, and I wanted to sell it to someone that I felt good about, right? So, Ryan says nothing wrong with infusing a business with money. It's the part they ask the employees to recoup and maximize their investment that can be shady at times. Not all are bad, but many are though. Yeah, that's a really good point. Maybe some in the mix are the ones that are making them all look bad, right? That's just like anything else. There's heating and air technicians that make us all look bad, make all heating and air guys look bad. So I don't know what the percentage of them are, but um, it's a larger percentage than I would like. But that's a really, really good angle, you know, thought there. So let me jump to this article because I do think it is a good article. Let me see if I can make my fat face smaller. Had someone get mad at me the other day for calling my face fat, but that's just how I roll. In fact, this is not the right chat. Give me just a second, guys. I'm on the wrong one here. Give me just a second here. I'm gonna get the right chat cooking here. HVAC. God, bear with me here. Let's see. And live chats pop out. But yeah, I do wonder, you guys have been kind of quiet about this so far. Do you have any other concerns there? Does it concern you at all? Let's see. Present. I doing this live sometimes is when I go back and watch it, I'm like, good grief, why does anybody watch this show? All right, so cool. Now that I've got the right chat going, now let me jump over to our article. And so the article is actually on Forbes.com, which sounds fancy enough to me. And so coming down, it says private equity is coming for your AC repairman. I found some articles that were much more recent, but I thought that this one, just the title grabbed me, right? And I was like, okay, that's the one that we're going to jump over to if he's after the AC repairman, right? So let's go through this. And again, if you guys have any concerns or thoughts, drop those in the chat. But it says surprisingly, the HVAC service industry has recently become a hot target. So it says surprisingly. So whoever this person is, David McCombie is the contributor. And I'm not sure what his background is, but he starts it out saying surprisingly. And I'll say, as someone that's in the industry, and I've seen folks do very well. I've seen business owners. I've seen folks in all different sectors do very well with this industry, right? But even for me, when I started hearing rumblings of not just one company, but multiple companies across the country being bought up by private equity firms, I was like, interesting. That is interesting. So 5 years ago, there were only a limited universe of buyers interested in these businesses. Today, the interest has exploded, with 3 times as many buyers vying for a piece of the action. So why are private equity firms so eager to invest in HVAC companies? Let's see. Brian says a friend looked into an investor private equity. He found out how bad his books were. Ooh, interesting. That's an interesting point. So to have someone that knows numbers take a look at your numbers, it may actually jump out, have some things that help you out in business, whether you do or don't sell. That's a at least if I'm reading your comment correctly, Brian, that's how I'm taking it, and I think that's interesting. Ryan says it's the money they charge to be profitable, in quotes, that concerns me. I know prices of equipment is higher now, but around here it's nothing to get quoted. Wow, $30,000 for a new system install. Yeah, yeah. Prices are I was actually telling someone what we used to charge for to install a system when I started my business, and they were like, "What?" I mean, I can't even buy the equipment, not even a percentage of the equipment, a very, a fraction of the equipment for that price today. And what's crazy is my business, I didn't start it, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, we're talking 12, 13 years ago now. So it wasn't that long ago, and I would say for the same exact job today, it's easily triple the price, triple for the equipment, the materials to install that equipment, and the labor, and then of course just private. I mean, not private. I got private in my brain now. The overhead of running a business, you add all of that in there, easily triple what it used to be, easily. Al says, "How much you sold Griffin HVAC?" Wouldn't you like to know? That I will definitely keep that private. Uh, not as much as I could have gotten. I'll tell you that. I uh, I think that I it was much the money was not as important to me personally as making sure our customers and our employees were taken care of. So they invest in a company, build them up with their rules and a planned exit. I've actually heard a couple people say that they are only planning to be there for 3 or 4 years, which is quite interesting to me. Because who's then buying it? Is it a larger firm? I mean, what's the deal there? So, another well-ran company in the area that has a better control of their overhead will be half to 40% less and get great service and support. That's awesome. If you can find the good ones, right? When we help people on our website, newhvacguide.com, we will sometimes, you know, uh, tell folks it's not necessarily the size of the business, but we give them some key things to look for, when some questions to ask, and some red flags to watch out for when they're selecting a heating and air company. If you guys don't mind, I would like to take a moment though, and just a real quick 30-second commercial for tonight's sponsor of our show. Um, and let's do that now. I'll be right back. All right. So, um, yeah, back to the article. It says, "What is private equity? To understand this trend, it's essential to grasp what private equity is and how it operates." I'm probably about to be educated on all this because I have a thought in my brain and of what this is all about, and I'm wondering if this is going to play a role in the way to look at these things moving forward. It says private equity firms invest in and acquire private businesses with the goal of generating investment returns. US PE firms currently sit on nearly $1 trillion of dry powder or money waiting to be invested. They face pressure to deploy it effectively. If they don't use it, if they don't use it, they risk losing it. Most PE firms pursue a consolidation or a roll up strategy. This involves using a platform company to buy and integrate small add on acquisitions to quickly achieve scale. Of course, growth can be generated through opening up new cities. However, it takes significant time and investment to build brand recognition in a new area from scratch. Given their short holding periods, PE generally prefers to acquire proven pre-existing businesses. Upon exit, the consolidated entity captures the spread between the higher valuation multiples that larger businesses command and the lower multiples paid for the smaller purchases. So at the end of the day, though, I think it's interesting from a standpoint of looking at our industry that they see it as a good place to invest, right? And that should, tell a story right there. So I think that's interesting. Let's see. Ryan says the $30,000 price range definitely comes from the large, well marketed companies. If a company has a ton of marketing, I avoid them because it screams, hire me, I'm expensive. Well, and they've got to pay for that marketing, right? They've got a bunch of folks that they've got to get to work and yeah. Brian says I started with War Hero. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Hopefully it helps. Greg says let's go. Let's go. Emery says, "Hey Josh, my thermostat cuts off my system before the set point is met. Why is that?" Ooh, I don't know. Might need to have that thing looked at, pal. Thermostat cuts off. Um, if it's cutting off and then coming back on, like it's short cycling, you could have what's called a soft lockout. So it's either high pressure, low airflow, something like that could cause that. Definitely check over your system, make sure air filter's clean, um, things like that. Make sure all your vents are open. Now if it's one of those deals where it's shutting off and it's staying off for a while, but then it comes back on in like the middle of the night, I might lean more float switch. Making sure that your drains are good and clear. And then anything else other than those things, I would maybe call a pro. Let's get somebody in there. You've got an array of things that could be possibly causing that. Hopefully that helps. Ryan says, I also don't like that they still keep the old man of the companies that are bought. Interesting. I think private equity should be at the end of the name or something to identify themselves. Joking, but it's kind of deceptive. Yeah, I hear you. I've always actually found it interesting when folks do buy other businesses. Some companies will keep the name, the brand that some folks know and trust and has somewhat of a reputation, and then some of them will dissolve that name. And I've always found it interesting uh, when they do and when they don't. Wondering what their thought process behind that decision was. I don't claim to know everything. Sometimes there's things that work behind the scenes that maybe we don't know, but I do think that that's interesting. Brian says work hero. I'm not familiar with that, but I will definitely look it up. G, I'm going to call you G because I'm going to probably not pronounce that second word very well. What's the best way to connect ERV when you have multiple HVAC units? Ooh, now that's a question. Well, I mean, I think that just off the cuff, I think there's different philosophies, if you will. There's different what's the word I'm looking for? Ways of doing things. A lot I think just with the assumption that no house is created equal. I think there are rooms that you want to be positive pressure, some rooms you want to be negative pressure, and you need to keep that in mind when you're installing any ventilation at all. Um, and then I look at other things like the home itself, as far as um, is there any areas that need to be diluted better? Are there any areas that are less time is spent, more time is spent? There's a lot to that. So I would, if you're going to do it yourself, I would definitely watch a pile of videos on room balancing and ventilation online. There's obviously lots of content that's out there, but I think the best thing to do is hire a pro. I know all you guys seem to hate that answer, but some I wouldn't want to be a pro's guinea pig either. I don't want to just call any old heating and air company. I want somebody that knows ventilation well. There are a lot of heating and air guys out there that have been in the trade for years and years and years and have never installed a piece of ventilation equipment. I was one of them. I was in this trade for quite a while before I ever installed my first piece of equipment, because I worked at a company that did boilers for the longest time. And then as I moved more into working for a company that did more than that, I stayed more service. So I didn't do a lot of installations. And then the other, big elephant in the room is a lot of companies just simply, uh, especially older homes, they just weren't installing a lot of ventilation. They should have, but they weren't. So that's just the truth of it. Gary says the thermostat issue could be the offset. That's true too. If it's could be the thermostat itself not doing what you want it to do. It's shutting off prematurely, right? That's a really good point. Ryan says name the man. The name. Old name. Depends is the answer. That's right. How should a whole house dehumidifier be added to a system? Should it up air from before the air? Good grief, I can't read tonight. Should it up air from before the return and dump it back in the return so that it gets cleaned by the filter that's connected to the system? So, another one of those, it depends. I like Brian's answer there. Here we go. Depends is the answer. um, I would say, again, every house is different. I will say that I had a rep from one of the top manufacturers of dehumidifiers in my shop one day when a guy called and said, "Hey, I've got a home. I installed it and I've got it connected to the ductwork." How he had it connected to the ductwork, I'm not sure. I don't know if he was going return to return to the supply, or what he was doing, but he said that it just wasn't getting the humidity down. And he felt like from the specs, the dehumidifier was more than enough, sized more than enough to get the humidity down. And 12, I think if you're the 12 I met in Dallas, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. 12 was in one of my videos. Had a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. So good to see you. But yeah, so that rep that I'm talking about, he said to the contractor, he said, get all that ductwork removed. He said, do they have a crawl space? And I can't remember if they did or didn't, but his whole thing was get it on the lowest level of the house. If that's a crawl space or basement, let's get it down there and let's start there. Remove it from the ductwork, set it, and let's get the humidity dumping out of that house. And again, every house is different. I'm not saying that's what you need to do. But I did think that was super interesting, and it played a big role in how we moved forward in my area, which is a very humid area. I live on the coast of Virginia, and we're not in Florida. I'm not in the Everglades, but we do have some very humid days throughout the year, and it's a huge concern, right? Why do we insulate the suction line on an AC unit? That's a simple one. Although there are more answers, the main reason is condensation. So that line will get cold when it's in AC mode. And if it's not insulated, it will condensate and drip in places you don't want it to drip. But it also helps with efficiency. Not a lot, in my opinion, but a little. So meaning you could have some temperature drop between the evaporator coil and that long line set. If it's a split system all the way back to the outdoor unit, you could see some temperature difference there, but the main reason is condensation. Brian says dehumidifier is piped into the supply 12. Good. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Good to see you. G says follow up on ERV, thinking to dump fresh air to each multi-unit return. By the way, thanks. As it's very tough for me to just give you a blanket answer on that. I'm not saying that sounds bad. I think you want to look at there's actually a really good video online. I don't remember the guy's name, but his whole channel's about um home science, building science, and he does this really good video with a map, a floor plan of the home, and talks about the philosophy of each room on it needing to be positive or negative, right? So, just for example, off the cuff, we would want negative pressure in the bathrooms for obvious reasons. We don't want it to be positive pressure and be pushing humidity and odors to other parts of the home. So, that's just off the cuff. You want that, right? You want negative in the bathrooms, you want usually positive in the bedrooms, and so on. So Gary says, I have one for you, Josh. I'm going to take real quick, Gary, don't be mad at me. I'm going to take a real quick break from the chat because you guys are rolling and I really appreciate it. But let me jump back to this article and make sure we knock that out real quick. It says most PE firms pursue oh, we already read that paragraph. While they find the industry compelling, private equity typically looks for certain fact patterns, such as highly prioritizing opportunities with stable cash flows, which provide lenders comfort. Several elements make the HVAC industry particularly attractive to these investors. It's recession resistant and it's an essential service. And I'm not going to read through that. I think that's pretty self explanatory. Fragmented market with consolidation opportunities. The HVAC industry is highly fragmented with many small and medium-sized businesses operating independently. Moreover, there is no clear market leader, with the largest player having less than 2% of market share at best. There's various regional champions. Whoever successfully develops a recognizable national brand is virtually guaranteed to become a billionaire. I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but what do I know? I do think that there's a really good opportunity out there for a company that if they could develop a really good brand, I've got it. So if anybody does want to invest in or they want to start something, I've got the brand. In my opinion, I've got a brand that if I started a heating and air company tomorrow, which I have no plans to, but if I did, it would easily be the best brand in the industry. Easily. I don't even think there's a debate. And I'm that confident in that brand. But I'm going to leave that alone for now. Growth tailwinds. The HVAC industry is expected to experience above average growth due to several factors. Extreme temperatures cause more wear and tear on AC systems, requiring them to be replaced more often. In fact, the average lifespan of the units is 13 years, nearly 40% lower than a decade earlier. Additionally, increasing energy efficiency standards are driving demand for retrofit installations. I can't debate that. So that's why they're interested in our industry, I guess. That's interesting. Yeah, you guys made some good points though. Whether it's good or bad, that they're here, they are here. And I like what Ryan said though. Transparency is a good thing too, right? If they are here, maybe just being transparent about it. I don't know. Gary says, I have one for you, Josh. Should the water feed to an April air be connected to the hot water or cold? So I think, Gary, the answer to that question is you should follow the instructions. But I would bet there are times when you would connect to either one, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So there are steam humidifiers out there. There are also the old school with the wet pad style. And those suckers, I don't think you would want hot water. I've never seen one with hot water because they're a breeding ground for mold at times anyway. Brian says, doesn't depend on dehumidification. Don't dump hot air, dry air into the return. Ryan says, if it's piped into the supply, doesn't it skip the air filter? Not if it's done correctly. So if it's coming from the supply, it's going to push back towards the dehumidifier, be filtered there, and then be dumped back into the return again. So it's almost like a bypass damper or anything else. Bill says, hi Josh, love your channel. Thanks. People hit the like button. Amen. Thank you, Bill. Everybody, let's just do what Bill says and hit the like button. Whatever website you're watching, I would certainly appreciate that as well. Ryan says, Josh, so are you saying if I have a concealed crawl space, sealed crawl space, I might get more dehumidification from that method from having a dehumidifier in the crawl space rather than adding to the system itself? Yes, I am definitely saying that. If you have a sealed crawl space, it should either be conditioned or have a dehumidifier installed in it. And I will even say that most homes that I went in my area where humidity is a bear, that they might even have both, right? Home performance. Is that Brian must be talking about the guy that I was talking about. If it is that guy, Corbett Lunsford, there is a really good video about that. I like the competition in the HVAC industry and all the small to mid-sized companies competing. I will say one thing, that if a company does invest in another company, they've got to keep it attractive to the existing employees, because what's saying that someone doesn't, if they're not happy, they can always go become your competitor, right? That's always a possibility. 12 says, I'm getting scared. I hadn't serviced my unit in years. I never knew it was so much to it. Thank you for your content. Thank you. Brian says, lots of small, stupid guys in a truck. Brian, you're not supposed to say that out loud. How do they determine to install the furnace in the attic or not? Well, that's a really good question, Emery. Where you live seems to play a role in that, right? Regionally, some areas, I just helped somebody the other day and I said, do you have a crawl space? That's what I said. I said, do you have a crawl space? And because I was helping them figure a few things out. And their response was, I live in Texas. Of course not. And, I'm like, well, you can still have a crawl space in Texas, I think. Maybe you can't. Maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know, but I thought that was funny. They were like, I'm in Texas. Of course I don't have a crawl space. So, but I think that's part of it. I think sometimes it's whichever is easier for the builder. The builders seem to make those decisions more than the heating and air guys. And I used to get in some big arguments with some builders because I would not cut corners. And I know every heating and air guy says that, but I left a lot of money on the table because I just wouldn't do it. I remember one developer, he was a developer building a house. And I told him, look, you're going to do a load calculation. We're going to do a manual S. We're going to select the equipment. We're going to do everything correctly. And he's like, you sound like the kind of guy that's going to hold me up. So I'm going to call someone else. And I was like, you're right. You should call someone else because I am the guy that's going to do things right and hold you up. So 12 says, I'm going to binge watch your last few vids tomorrow or maybe later tonight. I had no clue how serious we should focus on our HVAC. Yeah. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but there's a little more to it. I had a lady one time that said, I live in this specific state, and in our state, we don't have to do maintenance to our heating and air systems. And I was like, yeah, you do. You may not be doing it, but you should be. Read the instructions that came with the equipment. I'm sure your manufacturer would disagree on that. So, let's see. Gary says, "Thanks, Josh. The original installation of my Heil gas furnace when the home was new hooked the Aprilaire humidification water panel system to the cold water feed. That was in 1979." Wow. Back then, Gary, a humidifier was probably the cat's meow, back in the 70s. It was probably pretty, cutting edge for you to, have raise the humidity in your home, and just with a simple dial on your humidistat, yeah, that was probably pretty fancy back then, my friend. Let's see. Ryan says Texas is mostly slab on grade due to the rock bed. Okay, so maybe that's why. Okay, because I asked him, I was like, so if you're not a crawl space, do you have an attic? I mean, do you have a basement, or is it on a slab? And then I Googled it, and it said that a large percentage of houses in Texas are on slabs. So, here in Virginia, I'm not saying we never see houses. In fact, my best friend's house was built on a slab. At least his last house was. But I think we see mostly, at least most of the houses I've been in, it's mostly crawl spaces. And I'm just going to throw some crazy percentages out there. I would guess that it's probably, 75 to 80% crawl spaces, and then 5% are basements. And then whatever's left, I mean, I'm sorry, 5% are slabs, and then whatever's left over is basements. Now, again, I'm sure there's neighborhoods that would break that rule, but just in general, in my experience, most homes I've been in are crawl space, 2 out of every 3. And then of whatever's left over, small percentage is slab. And then, 1 out of every 3 might be a basement. So Frost HVAC, I love that branding. That's a really good, Frost, some builders are really scummy companies. Yes. I will say, I'll even go so far to say, is the majority. Nothing burns me up more when I talk to somebody that builds a house and they say, well, we do everything right. And I said, yeah, that's what they all say. And none of them that I've come in contact with do. Builders hated us. It's why I didn't do a lot of new construction, because I just wouldn't. And, I remember one guy I got into it with one time, and he's like, I don't have enough room for you to be running ducts this big in the ceiling. We're trying to do this type of, I forget what they're called, but it's those ceilings that are kind of low, like 8 foot on the side. It's not a vaulted ceiling, so don't say that. But it's that ceiling that in the middle, it'll be up to like 12 feet. So it'll have like this, all the way around. And anyway, point is, we had limited space, and we needed to bring enough. It was a 5-ton system in there. I needed a big duct to come through there, and he wouldn't give it to me. And we had a few conversations. That's what I'll say. Bob says, in Houston, furnaces are in a closet or up in the attic. The problem with the attics, though, right? I think we can all agree what the problem is that thing is sometimes sitting in a furnace, right? The attic itself is an oven, and that's got to hurt efficiency. There's just no way around it, unless it's a conditioned attic, which brings a whole nother topic. I know that some of the building science guys roll over in their bed when we start talking about conditioned attics, because a lot of them are not done correctly, and it creates stack effect problems and air quality problems and so on. Watch a Ty Brannaman video on that. Jane, welcome to the show, says, would you recommend Tempstar over Carrier? Well, that's an interesting question, because Tempstar is made by Carrier. Tempstar is an ICP product, and they're both ultimately owned by the same corporation. But ultimately, I think my answer would be, I'd go with whatever contractor. If it's the same contractor, then, maybe I would just go with the less expensive option because they're, same, at least the same corporation. I'm not saying it's the same equipment before anybody gets mad. ICP doesn't always completely match up and be the exact same equipment as Carrier and Bryant, but it is the same corporation. So if it's the same company, if it's two different companies, I'm going with that whichever company gives me the more warm fuzzies, because I want the warm fuzzies. Brian says, hold things up, expensive. I'm so glad I met you. I didn't know. Haha, for real. I'm glad I met you too. Frost says Tempstar is a different branded carrier. Yes. Ryan says, Josh, any comments about your latest video on R54? I'm glad you asked this question. Once I can read it and get the answer out, I've got a crazy answer for you. And so anyway, Ryan says, Josh, any comments about your latest video on R454B refrigerant and equipment availability? Haven't heard other channels talking about it yet, I think. So you're not going to hear anyone talking about it that sells R454B stuff. Now, I'll just go ahead and throw out there. Obviously, I was a Daikin dealer at my company and they sponsor some of our content on our YouTube channel. So I probably sound biased. But you can, if you're in the trade, you can test me. Call tomorrow and see if your local supply house has any of it. And if they do, great. Buy a jug. Put it in your shop. If they don't, ask them how long it's going to be before they get some. Because there are suppliers that are telling folks out in the trade that they're looking at 10, 12, 14 weeks before they can get another jug of it in. And I say all that to say, one of the comments that I heard, or one of the comments left on my video, and someone I was helping on my website, both of those people told me that they're being told by their local contractors the opposite. So they are being told by specific brands that sell that other equipment that, oh yeah, no, we're good. Buy my equipment. Let me go ahead and get the system installed. It's that other, it's R32 that they're having problems with. And they're lying. I mean, I'm not saying, I should probably tread a little more carefully because things could change tomorrow. Tomorrow, R32 could become scarce as well. They're all HFCs. They're all going to get phased down in the AIM Act, right? But at the end of the day, get a second opinion. If you have someone telling you something opposite of what I'm telling you, you might want to call your local dealer that does sell products that include R32 and see if you're going to get the same answer. Because yeah, I got another story I could tell you, but I'm not going to. It's about a local company and what they were lied to about too, about revolving around some of the refrigerants. So I don't think anybody, I'll say this, I don't think anybody is doing anything necessarily out of malice, unless they are someone that's just simply lying to you. But so even if they're not doing anything out of malice, they are still, the writing is on the wall. It's either going to be hard to get or it's not. And if it's going to be hard to get, it might affect some people's decisions on which route they go, right? Humidifiers have been around a long time, started with radiator pans. Bill says, I have a Fujitsu heat pump with an air handler electric heat strips installed in my house. It works great. Just spent my first winter, but I don't know when the electric strips are on and powered. Interesting. Yeah. So some thermostats don't tell you. Some do, some don't. So yeah. In fact, Frost said, when you see your thermostat say emergency heat or auxiliary heat, then your AC. Yeah, some thermostats will have like a little indicator light or aux heat will pop on, but some don't. Some actually will not tell you. And the other thing that I don't think a lot of us talk about enough is the fact that all systems, all heat pumps, unless this is disabled, most heat pumps today, when they go in defrost mode, are energizing the heat strips as well. Even if it's just for a small amount of time, if that system goes into defrost mode, that board will send voltage on the W and energize that auxiliary heat strips so you're not getting a puff of cold air in the house. So I don't think that's talked about enough in our industry. And it'd be great if there was a way to efficiently defrost those systems. I mean, obviously some of the mini splits have figured it out. So, but mini splits are a whole nother animal, right? With the metering device being outside. So anyway, Brian says, no money in new construction, fighting for the lowest price. I experienced some of that as well. Frost says, you're not wrong. I was just trying to be nice. Thank you for liking my name. I am wrong about a lot of stuff though. I will say that. You guys know. Ryan knows. Ryan tells me all the time. Josh, if you needed to upgrade today and replace your Bosch and Goodman, it's crazy how Brian has been watching our show a while and he knows what systems I have in my house. I don't hide it. I tell stories and stuff. So that's funny. What would be your choices and why? Would you do VRV life and have one condenser with 2 air handlers or keep 2 separate systems? So Ryan, that's a really good question. And I think that it's an interesting answer because my answer would be different than what my wife's answer would be. Because my answer would be my upstairs, I would definitely do ductless. I would do a floor mount in the bedroom that I have my office in, my studio in now. And then I would probably do either a floor mount or yeah, I would probably do a floor mount out there too, in the large room of our upstairs. Um, just because it's got knee walls. But I'm not 100% against doing a pancake air handler either. So that would take care of the upstairs. And my wife does not want that. She wants a conventional system. So I compromised and we're going to, when the Goodman does fail, that's in the upstairs, I will do some sort of inverter with ducts, I'm sure. Probably a fit. Probably the new Fit Aurora coming. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but Daikin is launching the Fit Aurora, which is going to be their Mac Daddy side discharge high SEER inverter unit. So can't wait to get my hands on one of those. So that kind of answers the question for the upstairs. And the downstairs is very easy. When that system fails, if it failed tomorrow and money was no object and I just could do any system on the planet, then I would probably do a Fit Aurora downstairs. And I think my wife would be happy with that as well. So Emery says, do you still SE old GE units? Oh, C old units from the 70s or 80s pre-trained buyout. Well, I'm not in the game as much as I used to be. I see mostly what the company I work for now, I mostly just see their products every day because I'm helping guys that are buying our products. But I will say not that long ago, probably 6-7 years ago, I saw one of those old GE units. And it was pretty cool. Looking back now, I wish I would have taken more pictures, maybe even grabbed the emblem or something like that off of it. But back then, I remember walking up to it going, I see spine fin coil. What is this? So it's not a train. What is this? And for those of you that don't know, GE, if I remember correctly, the story goes GE invented or came up with spine fin, or at least was one of the first companies to use it. And of course, American Standards bought them out in some way, shape, or form, and then they split. And then the HVAC side was, or at least the name was affiliated or bought out by Train. I say all these vague words because I don't really know. I don't know who bought who and how all that works, you know. Brian says Carrier probably has a better warranty. It's possible, right? He's talking about the ICP and Carrier. Did I miss the big talking topic of the day? We did talk a lot about private equity earlier, Philip, but you can always go back, watch it. So Brian says government regulations are so awesome. I can feel the sarcasm. Debatable, Brian. CE asked for a warranty, fees, and freight depending on your. Oh, that's true. No comment. I'm gonna skip over that. Local love is the best. 12 with the coffee. Philip says, just got caught up. Hope everything is all right. Josh, thank you. Everything's fine. Just, um, um, I'd lost someone very near and dear to me this past week. I'll just say that. I'm gonna try not to get choked up. Um, Brian says, I personally don't like dealing with carrier enterprise, very corporate for good or bad. Farrell says, I'm gonna probably sell Goodman 32 equipment until this shortage for 454B is resolved. Farrell says, agreed, Brian. I can get better equipment from local suppliers. Brian says, I have a Greflex multi-port Daikin, 3 single Daikin, a Goodman 2-speed in the garage, locked in low. Nice. You got a lot of systems, my friend. Mark Boogie, welcome to the show. I don't think I've seen your name before. Would you go with a Daikin Fit or a Carrier Infinity Green Speed? For some of the reasons already mentioned by others, I personally would go Daikin. But obviously I'll have to say again, because the FTC says I have to, and that is Daikin is the main sponsor on our YouTube channel. They sponsor a lot of my content, and they were the company that I sold at my business. Brian says the Altherma. Ooh, I've not laid hands on an Altherma yet, but maybe I would put an Altherma downstairs at some point. Could you bring up the Daikin Fit Aurora on the live stream? Can you bring it up? I did. I hope it's okay that I did. Spine fin coils were GE product, and then Trane got it. The Trane Tyler plant was also GE's. Trane bought GE and then American Standard. Got it. Okay, so that's the timeline of things on all of that. Yeah, so feel free to drop any more questions, comments. Tonight's been buzzing. I appreciate all you guys. If you don't mind hitting that like button and or subscribe, definitely appreciate that. I do like to say, as we do wrap up and as you guys drop any last minute questions or comments in there, and that is to say, we know there's bad apples in our industry. We know there's people that make us all look bad. And if you know a good apple, if you know someone in your area that's a heating and air, plumbing, or electrical company, and they're a good apple, drop their name and where they're located in the chat. Let's show those folks some love. And you never know, if someone in your area sees your comment, you might be able to show them a little more than love and send some business their way. So I will put right there, any companies you guys put, I'll make it pop up right there and we'll highlight them. So, Brian says a Daikin ductless in the green room. Yep. I heard and saw GE is making ACs again. Kind of curious where that goes. I saw that too, and I don't know that it's them. Like I don't know if it's just like we see all these other companies licensing other American names. I wonder who actually is producing, who's manufacturing the equipment. I actually wonder if we were to remove all badges off equipment and make companies put the label of who the actual manufacturer of that company is, and we would probably find out that there's a whole lot less brands than there are manufacturers, right? And it would also be interesting to see who sells what and all of that, right? So companies that you thought were competitors and they're actually owned by the same entity or something, that would be interesting to see. So Bill, thank you for that. Bob says Morrow Mechanical, Houston Metro. So shout out to those folks. They must be doing something right. Mark says, Mark, thank you for the gift there. You said you would go Daikin over Carrier, but why? So I'm not going to try to, since you gave me the money, I will go more further than I planned to. If you notice, I glossed high. But I will say that in my business, I dealt with both companies regularly. And I will also say that my Carrier supplier had a great guy that worked there named Chris. Loved Chris. Chris took care of me Multiple times he went out of his way to help us at our business, and I am forever indebted to him for that. That said, there are certain things or ways that Carrier does business that I was not a fan of. Um, and I'll just be blunt and honest because I'm not lying. I'm not slandering them. This is true. My local supplier would not let us return a board once because my guys had opened the package. So they sent me the wrong board. I didn't order the wrong board. They sent me the wrong board and they admitted that. But because my guys didn't hold the clear package up and notice before opening that it was the wrong board and they opened the package and tried to put the board in, that they would not refund my money for that board. And I can probably tell you a few more stories that are even uglier, but that just kind of gives you a snapshot. In contrast, um, Daikin has just always been very fair to me. Daikin and Goodman. Um, we don't have a lot of Amana in my area. There's not a lot of companies putting it in, but we did come across a few. So Daikin, Amana, Goodman, and they always honored their warranties. They always took care of us and so on. So that's the main reasons. I think there's some other reasons too. Maybe just personal experiences, whereas someone might like Carrier more because of their personal experiences. But that was enough for me, even early on in my business, to avoid certain brands over others. So, wow, you guys are popping, man. The chat is rolling. Let's see. Uh, Frost says, I heard and saw GE is making a. Okay, gotcha. I'm trying to get back on track here. GE is owned by Haier, a Chinese manufacturer. Interesting. Frost says, I've just recently started an AC business in Central Florida, and one of our main goals is to provide high quality work and honest dealings, separate my business from the rest by treating and be better. Nice. I like it. I like it. Feel free to drop the name of your business in there, Frost. You have my permission and blessing to do so. Gary says, thank you, Josh. Great group in here tonight. Kept you busy. See you and the gang next week. Thanks, Gary. Good to see you as always. 12 says, good Apple. Let me stop joking. Yes, we need to get these units together, bring the cost down of the circulation of heat and air. Ream started making Friedrich AC again, even though their previous central air division was sold to Snyder Arco Air back in the 80s. So that's interesting because I have not personally laid hands, but I've been told by others that Friedrich, at least the side discharge units, are rebranded Hisense units. That's what I've been told. Not saying that's correct, but that's interesting about Ream. In fact, I got home from a call where I saved a customer an install. All that was needed was to repair the Herm wire on the cap. Yeah, some companies will use any reason under the sun to try to sell that unit, and that's how you develop a really good following. That's what we did at my company. I probably left some money on the table early on, but you start getting loyal customers when you treat them right. So that's awesome, man. Gree is massive. Yes, they are. Ream also bought out Nordyne. They're going to label Ream Root equipment over Nordyne manufactured equipment. Ugh. No comment on that. Other than ugh. If my neighbor is burning stuff up in their yard, is there a way to stop that smoke mess entering my home through the vac unit ducts, or maybe just turn everything off, or what? So every house is different, as I said, but yes, there are probably things you can do to stop that. I did a video where we had the wildfires not long ago talking about some of that, so check that video out. But there is obviously the big three are filtration, ventilation, and humidity control when you're talking about air quality. Well, when you lose ventilation, you can't bring in outdoor fresh air. Then you need to lean on that filtration and air cleaning a little bit more as well. But there's probably things you need to do to seal and make sure that that air is not entering your home. Unfortunately, though, if you have a home where you're opening the foundation vents in the summer, to, try to air out that crawl space, then you might find that that it might be harder to keep that smoke from getting into your home. Let's see. I'm just going to try to get through these last comments real quick, guys. Frost says Air Brothers Mechanical servicing Central Florida. So shout out to those folks. Make sure you look them up if you're in the Gainesville, Orlando, or Tampa area. Brian says Carriers Corporate. I had issues with Daikin. The supplier Hoffman and Hoffman are not good at supporting the customer. I didn't say anything. Brian has his own opinions, folks. I had an insurance second inspection. Previous company adjusted some wires and so on. So 12 says, I'll go find that video. All right. Awesome. Well, good enough, guys. This was a great week among the darkness. We found the light. And I do appreciate you guys. If you are new to us, if you haven't been here before, make sure you subscribe for more heating and air tips. And we try to stay on top of the latest news. I've got some another crazy video coming out that I think will surprise you guys. I don't want to give it away, but some more craziness of things going on in our industry. But anyway, that said, I will be back next week. I'll be on the road. Next week, I'm doing a class down in North Carolina. We're actually, Daikin is doing a class and I'm there helping, and I'm going to attend the class as well. But I'll be in North Carolina for 3 days, and I'll be doing the show from my RV that I'm dragging down there. At least I think that's what I'm going to be doing. So I'll try to bring all my gear, and we'll still be here 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. In the meantime, make it a great week. We'll see you then. Take care.